Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be filming with you my June TBR. So June, as most people know, is Pride Month, and so I am going to be trying to read as many queer books as I can during the month of June. Thankfully, I'm participating in 2 readathons this month that are going to be very helpful in achieving that goal. And those are the Whatever You Want-a-thon and the Queer Lit Readathon. Both of these readathons are super exciting. One of them is Whatever You Want-a-thon, and this is the very first time this readathon is going to be running, and it is super, like, not complex, but it's simple and complex at the very same time. So it's simple in that you can read whatever you want, hence the title. It's great for helping to catch up on books that you really want to have read and you haven't had a chance to because they didn't fit any prompts or whatever, or they didn't fit the themes of certain readathons, or you've just been doing a bunch of readathons and want to take a break and do some mood reading. But it's also great because you split up into teams, you declare how many books you want to read during the month, and you sign up to the scoring sheet. And for every book that you read, you can earn a certain amount of points for your team. I am going to be joining Team Epic and High because I love epic and high fantasy. And that one is hosted by Cody and Becca. I'll leave their channels down below as well and their announcement videos. And the way that it works is there is a list of prompts that will give you bonus points towards each of the books that you read. So for every book you read before you hit your declared goal, so for myself I declared 10 books. So the first 10 books that I read get me 100 points each. And then you get bonus points for whether or not it was a book recommended by your team, a favorite book of your team members, if it's an LGBTQ+ book, if it is fulfills any of the prompts. You get more points the more prompts it fills, and then it also you get more points for how many extra things it fulfills. So it's super exciting. I'm very excited about it. Yeah, so that readathon is going on. And then also from the 6th to the 12th of June is going to be the Queer Lit Readathon. This is a readathon that runs multiple times a year, and it's super exciting. It has a bingo board that you can try and work towards, or you can just read as many LGBTQ+ books as you'd like during that week, and it's just a way to celebrate Pride. I have a bunch of queer books on my TBR that will fulfill many prompts on both Queer Lit and Whatever You Want-a-thon, so I'm going to go through those books now. There are a couple books that I don't have physical copies of because they are in the mail, so I will just put up little pictures of the covers for those. But let's just get started. So the first book that I'm going to try and get to during the month of June is Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. This book I've been meaning to read since I got it for a birthday present from my friend Kayla. This is one of her favorite books of all time. And again, I don't know a whole lot about it, but I do know that this is a sci-fi book, and it is described as lesbian necromancers in space. That's all I need to know. This book is going to fulfill multiple challenges for both readathons. For the Queer Lit Readathon, it is going to fulfill the intersectionality prompt because it has both POC representation and LGBTQ+ representation, so it's an intersectional book. And then it fulfills multiple challenges for the prompts for Whatever You Want-a-thon, but I'll just list them off now. You can only get a max of, you can only have it count for a max of 3 prompts in terms of points, but it fits many of the categories. It counts as a book I held within the last year. The cover has a lot of black on it, which is my Team Epic and High's color. It's queer, it's a debut novel, and it is out of my comfort zone because I don't read much sci-fi, but either way, I'm super excited. Next up is another present from Kayla, and that is A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. This is a queer retelling of Dracula's Wives. It is short, it is a novella, it is published by an indie publisher, and I'm super excited about it. It also counts for the Queer Lit Readathon as being vintage because it is set in the early 1900s, late 1800s. It's shorter than a novel. It has MSpec rep, which is within the LGBT community. MSpec means people who identify as being attracted to more than one gender, and the main character in this is bisexual. And then for Whatever You Want-a-thon, it counts as being a 5-star prediction. It is queer, it's a book I hold within the last year, and it is published by an indie bookseller or book publisher. Again, I'm super excited about this. I'm currently working towards writing a proposal for my PhD, which is centered around Gothic literature, which this definitely counts, so I'm very excited to read this soon. Next up is Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe. This is a new purchase for me, relatively. I think I featured it in my last book haul, or it's in my newest book haul, I can't quite remember. This follows our main character, Lily, who is a 17-year-old girl living in San Francisco in the 1950s. She is of Chinese descent and her parents are Chinese immigrants. So already it is a really hard place to be in, San Francisco, during the 1950s because of the whole Red Scare. And Lily's life just gets a little bit more complicated when she runs into Kathleen, coming out of the infamous lesbian bar, the Telegraph Club. And she starts to question her own sexuality. This book I've heard is really hard-hitting. I've heard it is really beautifully written and tells such a great story, and I'm so excited about it. In terms of the readathons, for the Queer Lit Readathon, it counts as a hard-hitting contemporary, as well as being vintage because it is set in the 1950s. For Whatever You Want-a-thon, it counts as a book I hauled recently. It is queer. It has POC rep, which means it also counts for the Queer Lit Readathon for its intersectionality prompt. And I saw it was recently featured in one of Emma Books' Queer Lit recommendations. And she said it was one of her favorite books of the year, so it counts as a bookish creator's favorite. I'm so excited to read this. I've been wanting to read it since I bought it, but I wanted to save it for June because I'm trying to read as many queer books as I can. And I'm just gonna have a great time reading it. I know I will. Next up is a book that's been on my TBR for much too long, and that is Girls of Storm and Shadow by Natasha Ngan. This is the sequel to Girls of Paper and Fire, one of my favorite books I read a couple of years ago. This book tells the story of Lei and Ren, who are two paper girls in this world. So this world has a bunch of different magical creatures that are considered to be demons, and there is a type of caste system going on in which humans are at the bottom. People who are half human, half demon are kind of in middle class, and then the highest class and the ruling class is ruled by demons, mostly under the rule of the Demon King. Every single year, the Demon King requires, I guess, 8 paper girls to be brought to the palace to become basically his concubines and slaves. It is considered to be a high honor to be chosen as a paper girl, but Lei wants nothing but. And she ends up being chosen as a 9th paper girl, the very first time there's ever been 9. And it just tells the story of resistance. It tells the story of queer love. It tells the story of Lei and Ren doing whatever they can to break out of this system and to bring the whole system down around them. It is Malaysian inspired, as Natasha Ngan is a Malaysian author, and I'm just so excited to read this. It's been on my TBR for too long, and this 3rd book is going to be coming out very soon, so I need to read this ASAP. This book fulfills the prompt for Queer Lit Readathon, as it has POC rep again as well, so it is intersectional. And then for the Whatever You Want-a-thon, again, it has POC rep. It is queer. It is a 5-star prediction for me, and then as well, it resembles one of the pride flags. I can see, like, with the purple and the pinks and everything like that, with the blue, it resembles the bi flag to me, so I'm very excited about this. Next up is a graphic novel that I got on recommendation from Jean over at Jean's Bookish Thoughts, and that is Lumberjanes by Noelle Stevenson. This is a queer graphic novel series focusing on a bunch of these girls at summer camp, and it sounds super fun. I know I'm gonna really enjoy it, and again, it's tiny, but the art style is just freaking gorgeous. I'm super into graphic novels right now, so very excited about this. For the Queer Lit Readathon, this one counts as being, this one counts towards the prompt of books that give you summer vibes because it's set at summer camp, and then also it is shorter than a novel. For the Whatever You Want-a-thon, this book apparently is queer. 5-star prediction for me. And I'm super excited about this. Next up, I have 2 more books that I'm going to be trying to read for the Queer Lit Readathon and Whatever You Want-a-thon, but they haven't arrived in the mail yet. So the first one is One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. One Last Stop follows 2 characters, one being August, who moves to New York City in order to prove herself right that, love stories from the movies and cheesy romance does not exist. and she never expects to have her morning subway commute turn into anything more than it is. But then one day she meets Jane on her subway commute. Jane is a punk rocker, looks like she's straight out of the 70s, and she just turns into August's biggest girl crush, or biggest crush on her subway commute, and it becomes her favorite part of her day. Until she realizes that Jane is doesn't just look like a punker from the 70s, she actually is displaced from the 1970s, and the two of them have to work together to try and find Jane her way home. This book looks adorable. I've been waiting for it for so long. It is on my most anticipated books of 2021 list, and I just can't wait. I pre-ordered it and it is supposed to be arriving on the 2nd, so I can't wait to have it in my hands, and it's probably going to be the first book that I read for this readathon. But for the Queer Lit Readathon, this counts as being LGBTQ, and it counts as having POC representation. And then for Whatever You Want-a-thon, the book cover, as you can see here, has a bunch of pinks, oranges, and whites, which to me represents the lesbian flag. It is queer. It is a 5-star prediction for me. It was hauled recently, and I'm also going to be reading it for my Reading Women challenge that I've been doing for the entire year of 2021. This one is probably my most anticipated book on this list, and I absolutely can't wait to read it. Next up is another book that hasn't quite arrived yet, but this one is Too Much Lip by Melissa Lukashenko. This book I'm reading for my monthly book club, and I'm super excited because it counts as a queer book to read for the month of June, and it fits for both these readathons perfectly. First of all, for the Queer Lit Readathon, it is a book not set in the on my continent. It is set in Australia, and it follows a character that is not only queer but also Indigenous to Australia, so it is also an intersectional book. For Whatever You Want-a-thon, this book is a book that I'm going to be hauling recently. It is outside of my comfort zone because it is more of a hard-hitting contemporary, which again I don't read very much of. It's technically a buddy read because I'm reading it for my book club. It has mental health representation because it deals with a lot of intersectional trauma and Indigenous history, and it also is queer. This book follows a character named Carrie Salter, who is an Indigenous Australian and a queer woman. She has spent her entire life avoiding two things: her hometown and prison, and however, life seems to have a funny way of bringing you back home, and she ends up having to go home because she finds out that there is a death in her family. And simultaneously trying to deal with the grief of a death in the family, she also has to deal with the fact that one of her Indigenous tribe's most sacred sites is currently under plans to be demolished by the Australian government. This book is going to be really hard-hitting. It's going to deal with intersectional issues. It's going to deal with intergenerational trauma and trauma dealing from colonization, which is something that I am super familiar with reading, but it doesn't make it any easier to read the more that you do. I've never read a book like this set in Australia and dealing with specifically Indigenous Australian issues, so I'm excited to dive into that, but it's going to be a really hard book to read this year, or this month, but nonetheless I'm very excited to read it and then discuss it with my book club. Next up, I'm planning on buddy reading The Goblin Emperor by Catherine Addison with my friend Kayla. This one I'm super excited about. I've never read a book centering around goblins, so this is going to be new and very exciting for my fantasy-loving heart. But this follows the young goblin prince, Maya, who has never expected to ever get anywhere close to ruling as the Goblin Emperor. He's lived his entire life in exile as he is the son of a marriage made purely for a treaty. He knows little of the rules of empire and has never lived with his father and his princely brothers. However, one day there is a tragic accident and both his father and all of his siblings end up dying, and Maya is called to rule as the Goblin Emperor. Learning to navigate this world and understand his place as the new head of the royal family, Maya also learns the terrible truth that his father and his siblings did not die in an accident, but they were murdered, and he has to try and figure out who killed them while also keeping himself safe. This is a book that I saw when I was buying books for Kayla on her wish list, and it was one of the books that I've been highly anticipating, so I decided to pick it up myself as well, and we're gonna try and read it this month. I'm very excited about it. Unfortunately, this book is not queer, so it won't count for anything for the Queer Lit Readathon. However, it does count for a few books for Whatever You Want-a-thon. For this one, it counts as a book that I hauled in the past year, it counts as a buddy read, and it counts for me for the buzzword book for this month. The Buzzword Readathon is hosted by Books and Lala every year, and it is a challenge to read a book with a certain word in the title each month of the year. For June, it is to read a book with a personal title in it, like Emperor. Very excited. The next books that I'm going to be reading I'm super excited about. Only one of them is going to count for Whatever You Want-a-thon, but I'm going to be trying to reread the entire Brown Sisters trilogy by Talia Hibbert, starting with Get a Life, Chloe Brown. This book is going to count for Whatever You Want-a-thon, and it is going to count for a few different prompts. First, it's going to be count for the prompt of me rereading a comfort read, and this entire series is a comfort read for me, and I've been wanting to reread it for a while. It is a 5-star prediction. I'm aware of the 5 stars I'm going to give it already because I've given it 5 stars before. It has POC rep. It has disability rep. It is a team favorite for the Camp Contemporary team. Once I'm done this, I'm going to be reading Take a Hint, Danny Brown, which will count for the Queer Lit Readathon as the main character, Danny, is bisexual. It is also going to count as having POC rep, mental health rep, 5-star prediction, and rereading a comfort read for the Whatever You Want-a-thon. Ditto for Eve Brown. I'm so excited to reread these. These are some of my favorite books I've ever read, and the very first adult romances I ever read. First in the series is Get a Life, Chloe Brown, and it follows Chloe, who is a young, Black, chronically ill woman who runs her own web design business and finds out that decides that her life is much too boring. She's super practical, she is super reserved, and then one day she almost gets hit by a bus and decides to change her life. She makes a list of things that she wants to do before she dies, and she ends up enlisting the help of her building manager, Red, who is a rough and tumble, dangerous bad boy who actually inside is a super softie who loves to paint and is absolutely a huge romantic. I'm obsessed with this series. I can't talk about it enough, so I'm going to stop talking about it now. Either way, I'm rereading all of these during the month of June. And then finally, the last prompt that I'm going to be able to complete during the during the readathon of Whatever You Want-a-thon, the prompt is to pick a book using a poll. So I've put these four next books up in a poll on Twitter. I don't have the results yet, so I'll insert a clip after this letting you know which book actually was chosen. But I'm getting Twitter to decide between 4 adult contemporaries. These are the 4. The first one is Normal People by Sally Rooney. This is an Irish adult contemporary that apparently is set to make you cry. Next up is The Wedding Date by Jasmine Guillory. This is a very popular adult romance. This follows 2 characters who end up in a fake dating scenario in order to not show up to the same wedding without a date, and they meet in the elevator, and that's when they decide to go as dates together, and it just follows their story. Next up is Beach Read by Emily Henry. This one follows 2 characters who are both authors. One is a romance novelist, one is a hard-hit or literary novelist. The 2 of them don't really take much stock into each other's writing style, and so they challenge each other while they're both vacationing in the same area to write in the other genre for the summer. This apparently is also quite hard-hitting and deals with some heavy topics, but I've heard it's fantastic and I've had it on my shelf for much too long. And then finally, the last book, which is kind of the one I really want to read, and I probably will read regardless of the result of the poll, is Dial A for Aunties by Jessie Q. Sutano. This follows one main character who ends up accidentally killing her blind date, and she has to enlist her mother and her eccentric aunties in order to help cover up the crime. Anyway, these 4 books are going to be decided on a poll, so I will insert the clip now of which book ended up being picked. Hi everybody, so it is the next day and my poll has finally been completed. And so it looks like for my read for the poll pick for Whatever You Want-a-thon is going to be Beach Read by Emily Henry. It deals with some hard-hitting topics, I know, so it might make me cry. But I've heard fantastic things about it, and I'm excited to finally read some of Emily Henry's books. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you're new here, please subscribe. I put out new bookish and writing videos every week. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and let me know down in the comments below if you're reading any of the books on my list, if you have read any of the books on my list, or if you're participating in either the Queer Lit Readathon or the Whatever You Want-a-thon happening this June. I'm super excited. You definitely should be participating in these because they're super exciting readathons that I think everybody should be a part of. I'll leave a link of all of the resources for both the readathons down below. And I hope you guys have a lovely day. Bye-bye.